Boris Johnson told ITV News today that Londoners should trust the police. He also said the government will be investing to make the streets safer for women, with plans to install more streetlights and CCTV cameras across the capital. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has been speaking to the Prime Minister.
Boris Johnson said the murder of Sarah Everard was appalling. There's no question women feel the police aren't handling some cases properly, and prosecutions in rape cases are taking far too long. But the Prime Minister also praised the police and said Londoners should trust them.
I just wanted to say, first of all, how shocking it is to everybody to see a police officer involved in this, but to stress that I don't think, Simon, that this means that people can't trust the police. It's vital that we understand the police are broadly speaking, wonderful people who are doing a very difficult job and doing it very, very well. And we must be able to trust them. What we want to do is make London ever safer, investing in new investments we're making, Safer Streets Fund across several boroughs, including Lambeth, to put in more CCTV, more street lighting.
The Prime Minister acknowledged that there needs to be a change in the culture of policing. More women police officers need to be recruited. But he wouldn't go as far as ordering an independent inquiry into the Everard case, preferring instead to rely on an investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. On ITV News London tomorrow at 6 o'clock, we'll hear what the Prime Minister thinks about the idea of charging motorists to cross the boundary into Greater London.
The Conservative Party conference has begun in Manchester, and in a sit-down with our political correspondent Simon Harris, former London Mayor and current Prime Minister Boris Johnson criticised Sadiq Khan's plans to charge motorists driving into Greater London. Mr Johnson called the idea crazed. So, Simon, he wasn't exactly holding back, was he?
No, he wasn't, Charlene. This is all to do with TfL's finances and that £4.5 billion government bailout it needed because of the loss of income during the pandemic. Transport for London bosses say that they need even more taxpayers' money to pay for future upgrades to the system. I put it to the Prime Minister that if he was still Mayor of London, he'd be lobbying very hard for that cash.
If I was still Mayor of London, I wouldn't have gone for the crazy policies that did so much damage to TfL's finances before the pandemic even began. And if you remember, Simon, I was absolutely ruthless in making sure that we had the funding that we needed.
But that was then, this is now. TfL needs the money.
But I do accept that that TfL has not been well managed recently. And we, of course, understand the priority of looking after London passengers and looking after the people, the London economy. So, we will do everything we can to help.
It's going to cost at least £8 billion to extend the Bakerloo line to Lewisham, one of the projects that's in doubt. Don't the people of Lewisham deserve to be levelled up just as much as people in the north of England? They
do, but what you need is a mayor who's going to come forward and bring a business case to us where, how we got Crossrail done. We got Crossrail done because the mayoralty worked with business across the city, worked with the construction industry, worked with developers, worked with everybody who was going to be part of it to ensure that we had a business case.
One business case that the mayor has come up with.
We have not produced here. What's so sad?
He has come up with one funding idea.
He has not produced a business case either for the Bakerloo line or indeed for Crossrail 2. Come on.
But he has come up with a funding idea which is to charge motorists driving into Greater London from outside up to £5.50 a day. Will you let him do that?
The approach of Labour politicians, Labour mayors, is always to try to clobber the motorists.
So is that a no to the boundary charge?
I don't know quite what he's trying to achieve, I haven't seen this proposal, whether it has any kind of environmental benefit or whatever.
It's about raising £500 million a year for TfL.
But he has not handled, Sadiq Khan has not handled the finances of TfL well. He set out, if you remember what happened, he set out on a course saying, I will be the new Labour mayor who cuts people's fares, right? Okay? And I never took that approach. I always leveled with people. I said, if you want better services, if you want investment in transport infrastructure in London, then it's going to have to come in the fare box. And I was absolutely straight with people. He totally failed to do that. Now, we're going to have to try and help him sort it out. I'll have a look at his crazed new tax on motorists. typical left-wing thing, but we'll have a look at it and we'll see what we can do.
Prime Minister, thank you for talking.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
A spokesperson for the Mayor said TfL only has financial problems because of the pandemic, and the boundary charge is still at this stage only an idea. Since his re-election, Sadiq Khan has been trying to strike a more conciliatory tone, at least in public, in his dealings with the government. But judging by the Prime Minister's reaction today, Charlene, this doesn't look like it's a two-way process.
OK, Simon, thank you.
Good evening. They say a week is a long time in politics. Well, just 2 days ago, the Prime Minister said a public inquiry into how Sarah Everard's killer was kept on by the Metropolitan Police wasn't necessary. But today, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, announced that an inquiry would take place. The public have a right to know what the failures were, she said. The culture of policing will be investigated. Vetting and disciplinary proceedings will also be looked at. Ms Patel said she was going to redouble her efforts to make sure women and girls feel safer. Well, our political correspondent Simon Harris is at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, where this was announced. Simon.
Geraint, public confidence in the police has been badly damaged by the fallout from the Sarah Everard murder. But the government has resisted calls for a formal inquiry into how Wayne Couzens hoodwinked the Met into believing he was a fit and proper person to wear the uniform of a police officer. Today, that changed. Tory Home Secretaries traditionally use their conference speech to big up the party's policy on law and order. But Priti Patel was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Sarah Everard murder has exposed what she called unimaginable failings in policing.
It is abhorrent that a serving police officer was able to abuse his position of power, authority and trust to commit such a horrific crime. The public have a right to know what systematic failures enabled his continued employment as a police officer.
The Home Secretary said a new inquiry would provide independent oversight into what happened. In the space of 48 hours, the government appears to have given in to growing pressure. Just 2 days ago, the Prime Minister seemed content to leave the investigation to the Independent Office for Police Conduct.
The IOPC is now doing that, and we've got to get to the bottom of it.
Wayne Couzens was an off-duty police officer who used his warrant card and handcuffs to kidnap Sarah before raping and murdering her. The new inquiry will look at his previous behaviour and missed opportunities to catch him before he became a killer.
It's really important for somebody other than the police to look into whether the vetting processes are fit for purpose, who the police recruits, the process of the recruitment and the training, but also in relation to once they've joined the police service, if there are any concerns around misogyny or sexism or racism or homophobia, that police officer is kicked out.
We think an inquiry is part of the right course of action. We think there's lots to be done and a lot should be implemented right away. We can't wait for the outcome of this. They spent 6 months since Sarah died and nothing changed.
Alex chairs the London branch of Conservative Young Women and welcomed the inquiry.
I think this past year has been particularly worrying, hearing about the murder of Sarah as well as other young women in the city in situations which I have been through, where many times I thought that could have been me going back home.
The murder of Sarah Everard is set to become a watershed moment for policing in London. The Home Secretary's investigation will go beyond Couzens to look at wider issues, including workplace behaviour. This new inquiry means there are now 3 formal investigations into police failings. One by the Independent Office for Police Conduct, as we've heard. Another, a review announced yesterday by the Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick. The Home Office says it will draw on the IOPC's inquiry, while the Commissioner says she will work closely with the Home Office team. So it looks as if there will be some overlapping. We now await, Geraint, an announcement from the Home Office who will chair the inquiry and what its precise terms of reference will be.
OK, Simon Harris, many thanks.
Next, today the eyes of Westminster turned to Manchester as Prime Minister Boris Johnson gave his speech to the Conservative Party conference. He argued attention should stay up there, promising to concentrate on deprived northern towns and cities to help ease pressure on what he called the overheating South East England. But does levelling up in the north actually mean levelling down in the south? Back here in London, unemployment has risen over the past year and there are concerns the capital could be left behind. From Manchester, our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
He might be a London MP, but Boris Johnson has set his sights on other parts of the country. Levelling up has become his mantra. And for those who wonder if it means levelling down in London, the Prime Minister had this message.
Levelling up works for the whole country, and it is the right and responsible policy because it helps to take the pressure off parts of the overheating southeast while simultaneously offering hope and opportunity to those areas that have felt left behind.
But far from overheating, some parts of the London economy are lagging behind other regions. Research shows 44% of Londoners made redundant during the pandemic have found a new job, but it's 58% in the rest of the UK. The number of job vacancies in London in September was only 8% higher than in 2019. Across the whole country, the number of vacancies was up 24%.
London generates nearly a quarter of the nation's economic output and around a third of its taxes. And at the moment, we're just not hearing that in the government's levelling up agenda. You know, the business activity in London is funding public services in other parts of the country. And so the government really needs a successful London to deliver on its levelling up objectives and ambitions. And we very much want to see that happen.
The Prime Minister praised the city, saying capitalism was behind the development of a COVID vaccine. But he also suggested London's long tradition of attracting workers from the rest of the UK was misplaced.
There is no reason why the inhabitants of one part of the country should be geographically fated to be poorer than others, or why people should feel they have to move away from their loved ones or communities to reach their potential.
We want people to be able to set up businesses around the country, to be able to stay in their town that they were born in and help those towns prosper and the talent in those areas prosper without feeling the need that they need to go and see the bright city lights of London.
We've got to make sure that London does not miss out, because London is where we need to keep everybody going, as well as, of course, support those coastal towns and rural areas.
There is, of course, a political reality behind the Prime Minister's pitch to other parts of the country. London is increasingly seen as a Labour city. It has a Labour mayor. The Conservatives control just 7 out of 32 London boroughs, and of 73 London MPs, just 21 are Tories. After the last election, the Conservatives have calculated the North in particular is now much more fertile ground for potential Tory voters. Simon Harris, ITV News, Manchester.
Good evening. The Mayor says he hopes to make an announcement on reopening the tube within weeks, but the full service is unlikely to return until next year. His comments were made after 80,000 women signed a petition calling for the 24-hour service to restart after closing during the pandemic. Campaigners say it is needed now to keep women and girls safe through the winter, arguing the murders of Sarah Everard and Sabina Nessa have left many feeling even more vulnerable at night. In a moment, we'll speak to the university students who started the petition, but first, here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
Welcome to the first night tube service.
Londoners had to wait more than 150 years for tube trains which ran through the night. So there were celebrations in 2016 when London truly became a 24-hour city. But less than 4 years later, the night tube came to a standstill, an early casualty of COVID, and there's no timetable for its return.
We had it running before COVID. What is preventing the Mayor from starting it next weekend? We've got to ensure that women are safe, whether they're coming out to enjoy themselves or they're going home after a hard night's work.
More than 80,000 people have signed an online petition calling for the night tube to be reinstated. It says the murder of Sarah Everard and Sabina Nessa epitomises the fear women face of walking alone.
We like to party, we like to stay at night, so it's preferable if the underground is open.
If you can't get home after a party or seeing someone, you know, what do you do? And a taxi is very expensive.
It's safer than sort of waiting around at a bus stop. You know, you can just go straight to the tube and the train's going to come, and then you can, you know, get home.
In July, London's nightclubs were finally allowed to reopen their doors, but ever since, customers and staff have had to manage without an all-night underground service.
We want nighttime economy support. We need to bring back the nighttime tube now, not next year, now.
There was no need for a night tube during lockdown, so the service on 5 lines was cancelled in March 2020. Drivers were moved on to day shifts to cover for colleagues who were sick or self-isolating. And London Underground says it now needs to train new drivers, but hasn't been able to because of social distancing. The Mayor expects to make an announcement in the next couple of weeks. TfL are suggesting that the entire night tube might not be running until next year.
Well, let's wait and see. What we're trying to do is encourage people back on public transport, but also I recognise it's not about demand as far as women and girls are concerned. Many women and girls are imposing on themselves a curfew because they're scared to go at night time. I understand the difference having safe public transport makes.
For now, Transport for London won't commit to a date for reopening, saying only it will be as soon as possible. Simon Harris, ITV News.